Today we're going to visit JP King at Paper Pusher, his Toronto-based experimental publishing laboratory.
So I don't necessarily work in any specific medium. I'm not a painter or a drawer, nor am I an anthropologist, a historian, or a philosopher. But what I do borrows and samples bits and pieces of methodology from these various fields. So Paper Pusher is an experimental publication laboratory that focuses on the risograph printing method, which is a sort of old, obsolete technology. What drew me to risography in the first place was a desire to be making more complex publications than what was commercially available, or what I could afford. Paper Pusher as a platform sort of allows me to explore print in a multitude of ways with a range of different relationships.
And how would you describe risography? What is that exactly?
Yeah, so risography is a type of printing technology that comes out of Japan in the 1970s, 80s. It's sort of best described as like a hybrid between screen printing and photocopying. So I can print one layer in blue, the next layer in yellow, and as that yellow overprints the blue, we get a green layer.
What I think is so great about what JP does with Paper Pusher is he brings an entrepreneurial spirit to his work. Some of his projects are commercial successes like the day planner and the calendar, while others are more artistic collaborations. This is an incredible book. JP, tell me about it. Was this one of your collaborations with an artist?
Yeah, so this was a publication that I made with a Montreal-based artist named Jessica McCormick. And she came to me with a series of watercolor illustrations and a text document that she'd written, and she said, I'd like to make a book. Over the course of a few meetings, we started to imagine this object collaboratively.
So is this a typical example of risography then?
You know, not really. Most people working with the risograph are generally doing 1 and 2 color work, so it's relatively simple. And this book is actually a sort of a faux CMYK process. So it's looking to achieve the effects of full color printing, but doing it with a sort of compromised color spectrum. I mean, you can't quote me on this officially, but I think that it might be one of the most complex risograph books in existence.
Well, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. I made this little tiny book called Materialists Anonymous, which takes consumption as a form of addiction and offers you a 12-step recovery program.
Okay. In an era when printing is being transformed digitally, JP is delving deep into the consumerist underpinnings of our culture. So JP, you work with so much paper and you work on these incredible collaborations, print-based collaborations, and yet on the other side of it, you have quite a deep interest in this idea of disposal.
People seem to rather effortlessly eliminate material possessions from their lives. And it struck me that I had just never really sort of learned that anywhere along the way. So I started to devote myself to trying to comprehend what the sort of psychological process of dispossession is.
Sure. Also, people get rid of things, but they don't really get rid of things. They get rid of things, they leave their minds, they leave their heads, they leave their immediate surroundings, but where do they go to?
It just goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
We're constantly in this process of shifting, sorting, ordering, and rearranging things.
So our society is so based in consumption, and it seems like there's relatively little thought given to the disposal side of the equation.
Not a lot of attention has been given to discard culture. In fact, there's been an enormous amount of thought looking at production, industrial production, since the time of Marx. And then in the 1970s and 1980s, there was a lot of work done looking at consumer identity and consumption, the ways that consumption and consumer patterns sort of shape our culture and our society. And yet, you're totally right, there's not that many people looking at waste.
JP is committed to the craft of risography, as well as to an understanding of the pressures that materialist culture places on us and our world. His art projects and galleries show his commitment to collaboration as a core element of production and community building. At events like Nuit Blanche, he brings the vast issue of waste into sharp focus. But this self-described workaholic wouldn't be able to pull this off if he didn't have a system. Tell me about this one, JP, brainstorming diagrams. This looks interesting.
It's a sort of a stationary pad of 8 different blank brainstorming diagrams.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a blank mind map.
If you're not sure where to start, you can start by putting one idea in there, and then it leads you around to these.
Yeah, I mean, I designed it just to sort of like help my brain start to work through more complex ideas.
Yeah. You're working on a book, I understand, with Penguin.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
The book's really broken into sort of two primary sections. The first of which I'm calling a life audit, and the second of which is a life design. And in both cases, it's trying to use principles of design applied to how we might live our lives.
And why do you think a book like this is necessary right now?
We're sort of at this point where people are just enormously overwhelmed by the plethora of options in their lives. And not that I have the answers. I mean, I think each person has their own answers, but my hope is that this book can sort of help facilitate that decision-making process. A matter of like revealing the architecture of decision-making. And maybe in bringing some sort of visual form to it, we might see things a little more clearly.
In today's fast-paced, digitally driven world, JP provides these beautifully made organizational systems to allow people to get their lives in order. JP's use of design runs through his publishing endeavors, his interest in disposal culture, and his organizational projects.